Ciao friends, and welcome to Simple Italian Cooking. My name is Liz and I've got a good one today for you. We're talking about Pizzelle makers and how are you going to know which one to buy, because there's different options out there, and I'm going to help declutter all that thinking and help simplify it for you. So before we get into these tips, I think I got about 5 of them. If you love Italian food and you like Italian cooking, especially when it's super easy, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Because that way you'll get notified. You got to hit the notification button. So get notified, that little bell, so YouTube can let you know. And sign up for my newsletter where I send out Italian recipes every week. So I want to make sure you have that. And I got another cool thing for you, which I'll tell you about a little bit later. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about the reasons why you would want to buy a Pizzelle maker. Okay, so I know that sounds like kind of silly, but it is that you do kind of have two extremes here on the spectrum of Pizzelle maker buying. You got one hand, you've got the person who maybe you are so familiar with Pizzelle makers and you've been making them for years. You have a Pizzelle maker, it's been in the family for over 25 years, if not longer, but it's kind of on its way out. Now it's been so long, you don't know if they even make them like that. It was like the beloved family treasure of Italian cookies. Now you want something that's going to really live up to that standard. You might have, on the other hand, however, somebody who doesn't even know really what a Pizzelle is. They're kind of new to it. They maybe had it at a party and they just found out you actually, in order to make them, you need a Pizzelle maker. So they're kind of lost and they just want to know how to make the right choice. So either way, I'm going to help everybody out there, no matter what your reason is. So let's go ahead and get started with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is that to make a thin and crispy Pizzelle, which is typically what most people want, okay? That is the thin and crispy is the Italian culture, traditionally found in Italian culture. It's how, I had them growing up in our Italian home, and that recipe had been passed down in our family and passed down to me. And so I have a link below if you want to use my recipe for the thin and crispy Pizzelles. But my point is that a lot of times I see comments on Amazon about people, oh, the Pizzelle maker, I want a Pizzelle maker that makes a thin and crispy Pizzelle. I want a Pizzelle maker that doesn't make thick Pizzelles. I bought this Pizzelle maker and my Pizzelles aren't thin and crispy. Okay, the problem most likely is, unless you have a really weird Pizzelle maker, it's going to be in the recipe itself and the ingredients that you use. So the recipe that I use is very different, mostly different, than the one that comes in the booklet. I think the one in the booklet uses like way more butter than I do, and they use additional like ingredients that I just don't use. And mine come out nice and crispy, and like I'll show you, like here's a half of one here. Oh, there you go, like it just crumbled, see? It's really crispy. So it really comes down to the recipe itself. That has been my experience with that. Number 2, and I don't know if this is a tip, but more of a statement, just to reiterate, if you want to make Pizzelles, you have to use a Pizzelle maker. So just like in order to make waffles, you need a waffle maker, you can't get around it. You have to use a Pizzelle maker, and this is the one that I'm using this year, and this is what it looks like, okay? Now, that leads us right into into tip number 3. And tip number 3 is, when you're looking for a Pizzelle maker, don't make the mistake I did and just be like, oh, it's got grates and it looks like a Pizzelle maker, I'm gonna buy it. Because there's something else out there called a crumb baker or a crumb baker. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's similar to an Italian Pizzelle, but it's not Italian and it's not a Pizzelle. And I don't know what nationality it is, but that comes from that type of cookie, but it's not a Pizzelle. So fortunately, I realized what I had bought like one day before the return period ended and managed to get it out to the store to ship it back and made it just in time. Lesson learned. So you got to be really careful. Now, a typical Pizzelle maker, and I don't think this is a hard and fast rule, but most of the Pizzelle makers actually all the Pizzelle makers that I've owned, and I own 3 of them, okay? And that's a whole other story why I own 3. But the reason here is what I'm talking about is you have 2 designs. It's one design on the front, one design on the back. One has like this flower, which is more of a grain, okay, that represents the wheat in Italy. And then you have this, which is a weave, which represents the woven baskets, okay, to collect the grains. So that's what you get. Now, is that on every single one? I can't verify that. I just know that that's been on every single one. And when I did some research on it, that was the reason. I thought that is really cool. So, all right. So be careful of that. Make sure it is an actual Pizzelle maker. Tip number 4. So tip number 4 is when you're looking for a Pizzelle maker, decide if you want the 5-inch, okay, which is more like this. This is about this size, okay, or if you want the 3-inch, and those are called mini, M-I-N-I. That is like this one here. Now, this one is a Cuisinart one that I've had for a long time. It's no longer sold, so don't even bother looking for it. It had 3 to a press. What you can get is it's a little bigger than this, and it's going to have 4. So it'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. Instead of 2, it has 4 of them, and they're staggered, and they make smaller pizzelles. Why would you want a smaller one versus a larger one? That's totally up to you. There's really no wrong or right. Traditionally, I believe it's the 5-inch. That's what I grew up with. That's what I've seen other people that have talked about it. But I have to say the minis really do come in handy when you just don't want to have such a huge cookie. Maybe you just want to make a larger amount of cookies using the single batter. So like maybe you're going to give it to friends at work or friends and you don't want to use a whole 5-inch, or maybe it's just easier to serve at parties. I don't know. I just go with the 5-inch because that's what we've always done. So I also like using these for Pizzelle cannolis. Upcoming videos, so keep an eye out for that. But you can, if you have the mini, you can do miniature ones, and I actually think that that's really cool. So make sure to decide, do you want the larger ones where you can do 2 at a time? By the way, it takes about 30 minutes to go through a single batch of making them. So do you want the larger ones or do you want the 3-inch ones? That's up to you. Okay, so another thing that I've seen people that are not familiar with Pizzelle making make comments about is, man, I put it in the press and I put it in there and it spills out all the time off of the edges around and it's not a perfect circle. Okay, that's okay. Like, that is not something that a Pizzelle maker is going to fix. Either number 1, use less batter so that it doesn't go out if that's a really big issue. But number 2, it's common for that to happen. And we don't go, as Italians who have grown up with pizzelles, making pizzelles, we don't go through every pizzelle and say, oh, here it went over, I'm going to, take some off. It's got to be a perfect, print around all the edges. We don't do that. In fact, a lot of people, including myself, we just like to take the edges and we eat them anyway. I mean, it tastes great. So serve it. It adds character to the pizzelle. If it really bothers you and you want them perfect, you're just going to have to be really, really careful with the amount of batter you're putting in and how it spreads when you press it down. It's just not going to be perfect. And guess what? It's not meant to be perfect. It's totally okay. All right. And then as a bonus tip here, and I just want to mention about cleaning these. These are generally, I've never seen one that's not. They are Teflon non-stick. I am not a Teflon user. I don't own any Teflon except when it comes to these type of presses like a waffle press or this Pizzelle maker. I've just never seen them anything else. So if it's non-stick, you really don't have to worry about the batter sticking. I see people complain about that, and I'm not sure why it would be sticking on a non-stick. I've never had to oil it down, but if it does, you can always brush a little bit of butter on it, or brush a little bit of olive oil, okay? So when cleaning it, you want to make sure you unplug it, obviously, because it's on and off by unplugging it. Let it completely cool down. Use a damp cloth and just try and wipe everything out of the grooves. You don't want food sticking in here. You can always use a soft bristled brush, a clean one, to get those little food particles out. Wipe it so that it's dry. Let it dry because you want to make sure all the water's evaporated from the little grooves before you pack it up. So let it dry, let it sit out, let it dry, and then you can go ahead and put it away. Similar really to a waffle iron. And that's it, friends. So I went through the different tips. I hope this was really helpful. I'm going to put links below, and I did tell you that I did have a nice little bonus for you, and that is in the description. You're going to find, if you love Italian cookies and desserts, you're going to find a free mini e-cookbook that you can download and get for free five Italian desserts that you can easily make at home that taste absolutely delicious. Well, thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that you join our newsletter, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Grazie e ciao.